It's good to be with you all again as we prepare for our next session for stewards around the district. Our theme for this session is all about hospitality. The term hospitality has been thrown around more and more in Christian leadership and church circles. Speaking biblically, hospitality is treating strangers and friends alike. It's welcoming one another into our homes, into our lives, into our churches. Hospitality, as far as I'm concerned, is a sacred duty. What we know is that when we practice hospitality, we see congregational health, vitality, and fruitfulness. By repeating and improving our practice of hospitality, churches fulfill their mission to make disciples of Jesus Christ. What for? For the transformation of the world. Fruitful congregations are changing how they discern and organise their mission. Leaders are experimenting with alternative models, with mission initiatives that reach the unchurched and the nominally churched by going to where the people are, rather than expecting them to come to a place to join in traditional church activities. Faith communities are experimenting with discipleship approaches that prepare people to take the ministry of Christ into their neighbourhoods and workspaces, rather than merely inviting people to come to their church. Multicultural and next generation models are emerging that look completely different from what most church leaders have relied upon in the past. And of course, COVID-19 has significantly affected the way in which we do our mission. Fruitful ministries today are shifting from models based primarily on attractional assumptions, getting those outside the church in, to models based on missional assumptions, practicing discipleship that takes us into places, community networks that people already inhabit, as well as practicing hospitality when people actually do come into our buildings and enabling each one of us to flourish. So in this webinar, we're going to share with you some different ways in which as churches and disciples of Christ we offer hospitality in our different contexts. We'll be thinking about what does radical hospitality really look like? How do we understand hospitality as something we both give and receive in Christ? What prevents us from giving and receiving radical hospitality? You will hear from Liesa. Liesa will share with us some thoughts from a Fijian perspective. Becca, our District Wellbeing Officer, and Kate, Deputy Chair, you'll also hear from them. And then all together we will meet on the 14th of September at 7. Then we'll try and answer the questions or any comments that you might have. And I'll delve a little bit further into attractional models of hospitality, about what hospitable leadership looks like, and look at the things that we may not have covered that you actually wanted us to cover when we started thinking about what radical hospitality looks like. So I look forward to seeing you on the 14th of September, that's the date, at 7 o'clock, when Luke will be sending you all the Zoom information for you to receive, to come and to join either by phone, by iPad, by laptop. And what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at the different ways in which we, as disciples of Christ, can enable each other to flourish and to be whole in Christ. I look forward to seeing you then. God bless.
Hello everyone, and Bula Vinaka. My name is Liesa Ratambalavu. I'm originally from Fiji. I'm the wife of the Reverend Mano Ratambalavu of the South Derbyshire circuit. I'd like to thank Reverend Lorraine Mellon for inviting me to take part or to share a bit of Fijian hospitality in terms of our culture and how has been affected our faith journey here in the UK. First of all, hospitality in our Fijian culture is a key thing, and it is very much part of our culture. We always make sure that we provide the best for our visitors or for our guests that comes to our homes or comes to our village. And I'll just give an example of hospitality. So if you visited Fiji before, you will understand the Fijian hospitality. As soon as you set foot at the airport, Fiji airport in Nandi, you will experience the Mbula way, or the Fijian way of greeting our visitors that comes to our country. So you will see, a group of men, maybe in the airport, singing Fijian. We call it singing dringi. This is part of saying bula, or welcoming our visitors that come to our country. And also, if you come to our village for the first time, other villages will make sure that you are greeted in a very way that you will enjoy your stay. So they will provide the best food for you, they provide the best room for you to stay in, and you will also experience the traditional drinks. We call it kava. This is just to to welcome you in a Fijian way. I would give an example. When I was growing up in Fiji as a small girl, I always experience wherever I go that hospitality is always there. Even when we have our church meetings in our villages, you can see that all the mums will come with the best dishes that they will provide for the chief guests or for the church ministers or the church stewards when they have their meetings, and they will put the best mats, Fijian mats, for the guests to sit on. It is very much part of our culture. We call it the Mbula way, or the Fijian hospitality. So moving to the UK 18 years ago, we always make sure that we bring the Fijian hospitality with us, and this is then passed down to our children at home, and we make sure that they understand and then they know the hospitality in our Fijian culture. They can practice this when they're old. So we make sure when we have visitors at home, we provide the best food for them, the best room for them to stay, and we also make them feel at home when during their short visit. So yes, it is very much part of our culture, and even here in the UK, when we have our church meetings, the ladies will always make sure that they provide the best dishes. They put the top table for the chief guests. They always put mats for the chief guests to sit on. And when the chief guests go back to their homes, we always take, we call it the takeaway, the Fijian takeaway. We always make sure that they take food with them when they go back home, even if they reject or if they say, oh no thank you, but we always make sure it is part of our culture that they take some food and some goods with them, Fijian goods with them. So yeah, so I hope that you will enjoy the short video that I've shared with you today, and I also hope that the meeting goes well this evening.
Hi Becca.
Hello Kate.
You and I have worked together now for several weeks, but for the purpose of this webinar, I wondered if you could perhaps start by explaining the experiences that you bring to this moment, both from your role as the District Wellbeing Officer and daughter of the Manse. Growing up as a daughter of a Methodist minister, and now you are the wife of a Methodist minister.
Different Methodist ministers, just to clarify.
Yes. Yes, one Methodist minister. You've married one Methodist minister, and you're a daughter of a different Methodist minister. So Today's webinar is about how circuit stewards and stewards in general can support ministers in pastoral care and widening it out to hospitality as well. So I wondered how you could speak into that from all your various different roles.
We used to say that living in a manse meant that you were destined to live with brown swirly carpets all of your life. And actually, since becoming a minister's wife, either because I've raised the level of expectation or because we've been very fortunate, that's not been the case. The manse is a massive thing.
Okay.
It's where we live.
Yeah.
It's our home. And I remember as a child, someone used to walk into the house without asking permission because his collection had paid for it. And I think we're in an interesting situation with tethered housing, because there's many people in the world that live in a house that they don't own, but it's not as common to live in a house that you've not chosen to live in. And I mean, we're sitting in my back garden in front of a absolutely stunning house, and there is a huge amount of privilege of saying it's really hard living in a 4-bedroomed house on a very lovely road, but there is something about being restricted and not having choice, and so choice has become a really big deal for me. We happened to move quite a few times where we lived with the workmen sorting out the house for the people coming after us, and it was just bad fortune that it happened to be a few times where that happened, and that is difficult. It is difficult having choices made by other people in committee when it directly affects you as a family. And I am very Methodist, and I love the Methodist Church, but sometimes my life by committee feels difficult. So if we needed a burglar alarm because we'd been burgled 3 times, it took time for people to make that decision and to make it happen. And we didn't have that ability to go and buy a burglar alarm and put in expenses, and it works differently in different places, and different teams work differently, but that is a frustration, and I'm aware of the privilege in front of this beautiful Edwardian house, but it's hard to be both an adult and know if I was going to do it, I would do it in this way, but knowing that for charity law and for the restrictions of how you manage property, you don't have that say.
So in terms of good stewardship, how can our stewards make life easier and more positive for ministers and their families in terms of things like manses and where we live in our homes? My aunt is also a minister's wife, my mum is a minister's wife, my granny is a minister. This isn't just a couple of generations, this is many people, and because of that we've got many friends that are ministers and friends with their families, and it's being given choices, and conscious of that privilege, but also aware that when it comes to flooring, and they're such tiny things, but you know what, it's the tiny things that add up. I have felt so cared for when I've been asked what colour I would like on the walls, or we were moving to a place and they knew they were changing the manse, and this is rare and I wouldn't expect every property steward to do it, but we were asked to go and look too on Rightmove, to say, actually, I've got quite a bit of experience living in manses. I've never not lived in a manse. But what
do you need as a family, and what can you anticipate other people needing in a house that isn't just your house? It's also a place where you might give hospitality to other people. It's why manses have 4 bedrooms, so that you can have the spare room to offer to guests, to family. Being itinerant means that we often don't live anywhere near family and friends.
Yes.
And there is that understanding within the requirements for a building. And you know, we're living in times where people are struggling to eat, and they're struggling for money, and it does feel privileged and spoilt to say it matters what colour my floor is. But if a steward can choose the colour of my floor, then so can I.
Yes.
And I live with it. So it's that understanding. What choices would you like to make? Because some ministers don't care. They, you know.
It's about valuing you, though, and seeing you as a real person, as a human being, and valuing you as a person. I think comes in. I've had two manses where they have been painting, and they said, you want a choice in colour of your study, and I've said, can I have pink? And they've said, gulped, and then said, yes, that's fine. And I've had a pink study, but actually it's made all the difference. It probably seems ridiculous to them, but actually it's made a world of difference to me. It's the place I spend most of the time, and it has made all the difference to me. And actually my happiness has made a difference in the way that I've been able to minister to other people, to how you give out. It does these little things, and I think that's important.
They are little
things that actually make you feel that you are valued and important, and seen as something more than a commodity for the circuit.
Well, when I was teaching, there was always this surprise, and there was surprise when I got pregnant as well. But this surprise that I had a first name, and this surprise that I didn't live in school, and that I had a life outside. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of a danger of, because a minister performs a role and a function within a community, that them as a flawed human being, as we all are, can get overlooked and forgotten, and so any approach to pastoral care and towards hospitality has to be with the individual in mind, which means this minister and their circumstance, whether that's with or without a family, is going to be different from the next minister or the minister before them. And that's part of getting into a covenant relationship with that person and understanding who they are, which does take time and energy and commitment on behalf of those stewards. And in the social care setting, that's person-centered care, isn't it?
It is.
And it's, you know, the folders in my care home, they're really thick in terms of what makes a human being, and how do we look after them. Well, actually most of that is about their physical, and there's often 2 pages of the whole of the rest of the person, and maybe if we're going to do it really well, we need to work out how do we get that information, so that we can ask the right questions, and find out, get to know a human being, and become friends. Is it you that says about the stranger to a friend? Was that Lorraine?
Probably Lorraine. It sounds very
Probably
wise.
sounds wise, doesn't it?
It's probably Lorraine then. Actually, in Lorraine's introduction, she talks about radical hospitality and treating strangers like friends, and I wonder if from any of the different incarnations that you've and your family have journeyed through, from probation, appointments, of course, being young parents with young children, and reflecting back on your childhood, you can reflect on that statement that she made and share any positive experiences when good stewardship has enabled you and your family to transition from strangers to friends, and what made that possible.
Believe it or not, with this beautiful figure, it has often featured food. Food has been transformational. If you, I mean, we had a baby born 12 weeks early. Richard had a serious car crash where he flipped the car upside down and really broke himself. And in those times, people, they didn't just ask what we needed as an open-ended question, but it was, when can I bring you X, Y, and Z? What don't you eat? What do you eat? And when is it convenient for us to bring it to you? And that won't work for everyone.
No.
But it certainly worked for us. Is I've got you some stuff to put in your freezer, and it was practical responses. And I actually asked, we have got a Facebook group for clergy spouses. And I asked them, what experiences have you had where people have really shown care and love to you? And it was the little things like that, the sending cards, the doing practical things. There were quite a few mentions of gardens, because you inherit a garden. The if it's empty is quite expensive to fill, or if you've got a 4-bedroom house, it's often quite big. And some people will say, I wish they would make them easy, and that makes me twitch, because I don't want an easy garden. I love gardening, but other people don't, and for them it's work, and it's work in addition to their work. And it was practical things. What I did notice was how often people said, we were really looked after when we moved in. But the examples of subsequent years of what, the ups and downs of ministry, that if it's intentional, then there needs to be something planned or something talked about, to say throughout the years of a minister's service, which takes a lot out of people, it can be quite demanding on family life. What are we doing throughout that? And we were talking earlier, and my dad recognised that we weren't, there wasn't necessarily the intentionality towards hospitality for us as a family, and it was trying to work out how to break down some of those barriers in relationships so that we could build them up and be friends with people. And from the pulpit, he preached about receiving hospitality and the importance of receiving hospitality, and how we like to eat as a family, and we'd like to get together with people. And so one lady took it upon herself to bake for us cake every single week. And we didn't really eat cake, but the intention was to fulfill a beautiful need, and some of those cakes were absolutely delicious. There was a ginger one that nobody preferred, so that was the one that stayed in the freezer. But it did miss the point of trying to find ways for us to connect, because we've moved house, and we've often moved away from family and friends, and it's really hard to find a place. And I mean, I do say this to Richard without resentment, but it's easier for him when we move, because he moves into a community and a job, and I then have to kind of muddle my way through. And not everybody in church is going to be able to be my friend. And it would be really difficult if I was having to turn down friendship. But it's that awareness, and I mean, we've been very fortunate in the places we moved to, but recognising that the needs, and talking to different ministers at different times and their families about what they need, because a happy minister's wife or husband does make the world a better place.
It does, and I think there's probably something, isn't there, in acknowledging that different people come in different stages of their life. We were talking earlier about, and I said that when I started ministry, I was a single parent with a 6 and a 7-year-old, and the needs there were a lot different. And I remember people coming in. I made it known quite quickly that I was not domesticated, and they come with casseroles and often provide cake and stuff, which much to the children's great delight. And that need, there was great hospitality there, and there was an offer if ever I needed them to sit with the children at all. And then those needs changed, and when I moved to Wales, I remember I had a fantastic senior leadership team around me, and they actually said to me, what do you need from us? and I got such a good relationship with them that I can remember saying, I'm really homesick. I'm missing my family, because they were 3.5 hours away. And they said to me, one said, do you want to come for your tea? Not for a meal, but for your tea, which was different from using up yet another evening when I didn't want to go out another night and go, you know, and sit there and politely go for a meal, you know, as you do. But it was for me tea on my way to guide, so I was a guide leader, and I'd call in and it was a homemade meal, you know, apple crumble and custard, you know, round a table with a family, because I was missing that family. But as we've just said, now I'm remarried, and that would just be an inconvenience because I want to be at home with my husband. Whatever stage you're at, different ministers have different needs, and their families have different needs. So it's about trying to be in relationship so that the minister feels they can honestly say, actually, this is what I need right now, and the stewards can respond and hear that and try and find somebody that can actually deliver that to me.
And it won't be every steward.
No, not every steward.
So if we're saying the pastoral care of the minister, because minister is in covenantal relationship, they are not protected by employment law. They're in relationship with the church. Then it is the steward's role to ensure pastoral care is covered. But not every steward will be the appropriate person to form that close relationship, to ask the questions with the minister. So it would be the right person. And I mean, it's also recognising that ministers, there's a little plane going overhead, that ministers now have supervision to help them structure their work life and their professional development, along with MDR, and quite often along with spiritual accompanists. So there are already layers to keeping a minister on track professionally, but those layers for pastoral care aren't necessarily there in the same way. So it's knowing that it's a responsibility of the church leadership team, the circuit leadership team, to fulfill that need, and ensure ministers are looked after, and delegating if necessary. About half an hour before you came, we had someone from one of our churches who just popped round. She's not a steward, but she's absolutely our person who does pastoral care. She texts the children, she sings to them when they don't want to get up. She will, but you know, and she has made us her people. And so it won't necessarily be one of the circuit stewards or one of the leadership
Just
team.
Somebody who can connect.
But the right person for the right minister at the right stage of their life. And working out, well, then what are the questions to ask to find a way forward. And
I think it's understanding that the stewards need to understand the reason that we want good ministers and families and support networks, because actually happy ministers, fulfilled, flourishing ministers, mean that they in turn are better at their in their calling, and their gifts and skills are fulfilled in a fuller and better way to bring about the kingdom of God in this place. And that's what we all want ultimately.
Now, before we started and sat down for this, we did go through some of the questions that you might ask, and some of them made you twitch, didn't they, Kate? They did. They were difficult, because if we want to know what a person needs, then sometimes it's asking those questions, isn't it? So I'll do this one, and I'll only do this one because actually we've got 20 minutes worth of us talking.
That's excellent.
So I'll only do this one because underneath it are the questions of what stops this from being the case, what helps it be the case, what can stewards do to make it happen. So it is only, who is Kate at her very best? You're welcome.
Thank you. That was twitching me. Kate at her very best is somebody who is fulfilling her calling to God in all the ways possible, from that first time that I answered that call, and using all those gifts and skills that God blessed me with. And that isn't always possible, and sometimes it's more than possible. And the undercurrent to that is that sometimes those are stifled because of the situation that you're placed into. And sometimes you are blessed to be placed into a situation where you are seen and you are listened to, and people acknowledge and recognise what you're saying, and run with the ideas that you and the seeds that you sow, and you see them blossom and come to fruition. And they are the times which you get the most greatest joy and fulfillment from, and that is the times that I feel most fulfilled and most happy.
Yep, thank you. I think as we draw it to a close, that is probably one of the most important things, is knowing that our ministers are human beings who have changing needs all of the time. And I mean, we assume that ministers are, you know, capable, able people. They have been called and they've discerned their calling. They've gone through rigorous testing and hoop jumping to get to the point where they are. So it's not that you are like, I'm not saying you're in a care home. It's not that level of care. No. But it's understanding human beings as individuals, so that we can ask what they need and encourage that kind of well-being, because you matter, Kate,
and you matter. We want everybody to flourish and be the best person that they can be, the best minister that they can be, the best support, as you said, you're supporting at. I think you're so much more than that, but the best whoever they can be. And we want our wives and our husbands and our children to flourish alongside us the best we can be. And stewards and stewardship, the call to stewardship, part of that role is to acknowledge that, to see the person behind the collar, behind or alongside that minister, and to see them as real human beings with needs, desires, weaknesses, failings, joys and skills, and to see all of that and to help them flourish in whatever role they're doing, so that all of us can be part of this fantastic kingdom of God that we're called to serve.
With lush abundance and plates full of cake and flowers and
grapes in my teacup.
Well, thank you very much for listening to Kate and I chat. I could listen to us chat.
We could chat for hours, and we have been doing already.
For a lot longer. But we hope that's helpful, and that you can discern and explore your calling to the ministry that you're doing. Bye.